Hello, this is Photography Gamer. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm reviewing Dark Souls 3 for the PS4. The game is also available for the Xbox One and Microsoft Windows. Dark Souls 3 is an action role-playing game developed by From Software. The game is set in the Kingdom of Lothric, a dark and depressing world in keeping with the general style of the series. You play as the Ashen One, an undead who rises to the task of returning Prince Lothric and the Lords of Cinder to Firelink Shrine. The game can be played solo, in online co-op, and also features some PvP elements. So what is the game like to play? Well, you start by creating your own unique Ashen One, and the creation system allows you to choose your character class, starting items, and a visual appearance. Then after a brief tutorial, you'll find yourself in Firelink Shrine, the main hub of the game. Here you can purchase items from an old lady, level up if you have enough resources, or visit the blacksmith to improve your weapons and shields. One nice addition in Dark Souls 3 is the inclusion of elemental weapons, granting you ice and fire effects for example. However, for some unknown reason the developers have removed the ability to upgrade armor, which seems like a bit of a strange choice as the franchise needed more customization options, not less. So after the shrine, it's off into the dangerous and bleak world to find special items, kill bosses, and fight a plethora of gruesome creatures. Everything you kill drops souls, and the more souls you collect, the more you can level up your statistics, whether that be strength, stamina, intelligence, faith, etc. So you can shape your character into whatever build you wish. Combat is tactical and challenging with light and heavy attacks, blocking, parrying, and dodging. But combat is a fine balance between health and stamina. Every action takes stamina, and in the beginning you'll find yourself running out very quickly, which often leads to certain death. If you'd rather be a wizard, you can learn spells instead, or pyromancy abilities. There are special items that grant you character buffs, as well as magic rings providing augmented abilities. For me, the standout part of Dark Souls 3 were the enemies. There is an amazing variety of foes you'll encounter on your journey. From giant worms, dragons, poisonous frogs, Lothric knights, crucifix-carrying behemoths, slugs, skeletons, and even giant rats. Every enemy has a unique attack pattern and different strength and weakness, which all adds to the impressive gameplay variety combat-wise. You know, it's very tense the first time you encounter a new enemy, as you never know if this one is going to be the tricky, overpowered scumbag that's going to ruin your day. Probably will be, but you just don't know. Occasionally you do run into these enemies that will completely annihilate you, and they just seem completely overpowered when compared to the other enemies in that region. I mean, for the bosses I completely understand it, but the general day-to-day grunts in the map, it doesn't quite work and often feels like you're being trolled just to slow down your progression. Collision detection is still a big issue with the combat, as in some cases you'll get hit damage even though the enemy clearly hasn't even touched you. This is one area where the game hasn't improved since the first installment, and it's one of the most frustrating parts of the game. You also have the problem of invisible walls and barriers around environmental elements and enemies. For example, if you're in a corridor and a skeleton is in front of you, and you can clearly just run by, why can't you? Being the third game in the series, the developers really should have fixed these issues, but they still persist. The boss fights, they're generally very good, with varied and interesting battles to encounter along the road to the end game. Everyone will have a boss that they grow to hate in this game. For me, it was the Abyss Watchers. You'll die, die again, and it will drive you nuts. But it's in those moments when you do finally succeed that provide the biggest highlight in Dark Souls 3. Probably the biggest problem with Dark Souls as a franchise is the uninspired storytelling. None of the games have had an engaging narrative or any sense of real depth to the dialogue, and that's a big issue for such a challenging game. You know, what is the motivation to go on? Dark Souls games all start pretty much the same way. Someone says, hello there are these things you've got to do or kill, but why? Well, you just do it alright, so off you go. Oh okay, sure, why not? I mean, it's hardly even a story, and for me, that's the glaring problem with Dark Souls 3. You know, as I trudged my way through the campaign, killing minions, leveling up, conquering bosses, exploring new areas, I can't say I ever really cared what I was doing. It was just like doing it for the sake of doing it, and that's not really going to be enough for most people. So story-wise, do not expect much. It's a visceral experience really, rather than a story. Okay, let's talk about the game world. Well, at first, I quite liked it, but after about 10 hours it did start to dawn on me that I've been here before. The locations felt almost identical to previous ones in the other installments. It's still enjoyable exploring, discover new enemies, find items, kill bosses, but after a while you do realise you're doing the same thing you did in Dark Souls 1 and 2. And it's this familiarity that applies to the NPCs in the game world too. They're the same paper-thin characters we've seen twice before. They spew out line upon line of nonsensical dialogue that really does nothing to engage or interest you. The game features online play as well, with other players able to invade your game or vice versa. I didn't mind this, it does spice things up from time to time, but the co-op system is once again absolutely appalling. It's quite unbelievable that in 3 installments they still haven't managed to make a simple, user-friendly and fit-for-purpose co-op system. It's a huge disappointment, as Dark Souls is ideal for co-op, as it would make the process a lot more enjoyable and entertaining. But alas, From Software still seem incapable of fixing this. Graphically, the game adopts a drab and washed out visual style. It suits the morose and depressing nature and the futility of your quest. The animation does look very dated though, and it hasn't really changed since Dark Souls 1. The persistent problem with the invisible barriers is another technical issue that should have been removed by now. A lot of the graphical assets seem to have been reused, and if you played all 3 games next to each other, you'd be hard pressed to see any major improvement in the visuals. The music is somber and well suited to the depressing environments and the general drudgery of it. The voice acting isn't great though, with continuous failed attempts at whimsical commentary in almost every conversation. The ambient effects are very disappointing, and generally most of the sound effects feel recycled as well. Okay, what's good and what's bad? What's good? The enemies are varied, the game world is interesting to explore at first, most of the bosses are impressive, the addition of elemental weapons adds some variety, and the music is well suited. What's bad? Exploration soon becomes tedious, as do the persistent issues with poorly balanced difficulty. The lack of armor customization is a disappointing omission, the story and dialogue are uninspired, the co-op system is not fit for purpose, the invisible barriers are a persistent annoyance, the animation is wooden, and in general it's just another sequel that repeats the formula without any major innovation or improvement. So what's the verdict? Despite its familiar feel, Dark Souls 3 is a good game with a challenging and rewarding combat system. The enemy variety is impressive and the boss fights are very tough and memorable. But that's really where the positives end for me. Dark Souls was originally an innovative addition to the games industry, and one that inspired other developers to follow suit. Being the 3rd installment, I was hoping for a more polished and innovative experience. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and Dark Souls 3 is just another sequel that feels very similar to the previous games in the franchise. It seems like From Software are stuck in a rut, mainly due to the profitability of the franchise. Dark Souls 1 made a huge profit, and any business is always going to want to repeat that financial success. And in those instances, it's very rare to see further innovation or advancement on the product itself. Innovation and improvement clearly aren't a priority to the people who are making the game. From Dark Souls 1 to 3, very little has changed. It still has the imbalanced progression and difficulty levels. It still has one of the worst co-op systems in gaming today. The customization of weapons and armor are limited, even more so with the ability to upgrade your armor being removed. I loved the first game because it did something fresh, something new, but since then the series has really been going backwards. It's a game that brings nothing new to the table and fails to remedy or even acknowledge its flaws. As gamers, we should demand more, because otherwise in 15 years time all we're going to have is a whole bunch of tired sequels. So scoring wise, I still enjoyed the combat, I still enjoyed some of the elements, but there was too many persistent problems, so it's still barely worth it. I would say scoring wise, Dark Souls 3 gets 7 out of 10, just because the combat and the enemy variety really just hold it up. That's where the game's at its best. Everything else really needs a good look at. Otherwise it's just going to be a kind of a tired, repetitious game that we're going to see year in, year out. Okay, there you go. That was the review. Quite a long one today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is Photography Gamer signing off. Thank you.